Hello and welcome to the Down Under Visa Philippines to Australia podcast series. I'm your host, Jeff Harvie, registered migration agent with Down Under Visa, the premier Australian migration agent in Manila, Philippines, specialising in visas for Australian Filipina couples. We hope you enjoy this podcast and hope it proves useful to you. Please feel free to share this with your partner and with any of your interested friends. Let's get started. Police clearances for Australian visas. Why and how? Now, all Australian visas have what they call a character requirement, which means all visa applicants from Philippines to Australia need to pass what's known as the character test. Now, migration, like all specialist areas, has its own language, lots of acronyms and lots of expressions that only the in-crowd fully understand. What it means to you is that any criminal behaviour or records of the visa applicant, as well as the partner visa sponsor, will come into light. Now, police clearances, also known as penal clearances, will be needed, and they will need to consider if the applicant is the right sort of person to enter Australia. Now, just on inclusive language and acronyms and what have you, I try to be a little bit more of a straight shooter, as most people will notice. I would prefer to be informal. Australians seem to appreciate that far more than people trying to show off what a fine legal mind they have. Okay, the character test. Now, a visa applicant can fail the character test and will be refused an Australian visa if they do. Now, I can summarise the character test and the reasons for failure as follows. Okay, because the person has a substantial criminal record, and because the person has, or because the person has been associated with persons suspected of engaging in criminal conduct. Look, that happened in Australia recently with members of New Zealand bikie gangs in Australia. They didn't wait to see whether somebody was necessarily a hardened criminal themselves. If they were associated with a criminal organisation, they could cancel their visa based on that. Although here we're talking mostly about visa refusals. And other reason would be if the minister is satisfied, that's the Minister for Immigration, of course, is satisfied the person is not of good character due to their past and present criminal or general conduct. So it's fairly broad. In other words, if they really do, not like the sound of somebody, well, then they can deny them entry to Australia. Because the issue is about protecting the Australian public by preventing people with questionable character from entering Australia and especially to settle in Australia. Now, the full details are in Section 501 of the Migration Act, which I wouldn't bore anybody with. I think I'd rather not bore myself with it. In most cases, although it's fairly straightforward, which I will explain, you don't need to delve into things like that. And I will say it before anyone else says it. Yes, we all know when Australia was first settled, it was compulsory to fail the character test. But since the days of transporting of convicts from London for stealing loaves of bread, things have changed a little bit since then. Now, basically, they want what the Australian public wants. They want to keep out anybody who is a potential danger to the Australian public. That's the whole point of the whole thing. Now, substantial criminal record. Okay, what it means in simple terms, the person was not only convicted of a crime, but they were sentenced to 12 months or more imprisonment. They may have also been sentenced to death, which is considerably longer than 12 months. Now, they could have meant 2 or more terms, which total 12 months or more. It could also mean a suspended sentence, but it doesn't include good behaviour bonds or restraining orders. Those are the types of things that, an ex-wife takes out on somebody and says you can't come within, X amount of 500 metres of the house or whatever it happens to be. But again, if that's what's on your record, then that's nothing you need to be concerned about, if that's all it is. Association with criminals. Look, I have to say, we've never come across a client who's been refused based on that basis. But in theory, and I suppose in practice, it could mean if somebody was associated with a group or organisation which has been involved in criminal activities, biker gangs, some other form of organised crime, yes, it could be an issue. Other reasons, they can refuse people for things like being involved in people smuggling, not being smuggled themselves, but being an organiser of people smuggling, crimes against humanity, war crimes, terrorist activity, etc. So, point is, they need to ensure that any visa applicant is of acceptable character, otherwise Australia will deny them a visa. And it is reasonably fair. Someone shoplifts and gets a fine, or someone gets into a fight in the pub and punches somebody who probably deserved it and gets 3 months jail, really no issue. Getting a good behaviour bond for having a bit of marijuana on them, drink driving, etc., not enough to deny somebody entry to Australia. Those convicted of serious crimes where they've been locked up for long periods, or members of the mafia or terrorists from ISIS or something like that, well then no, they won't get into Australia. Australian sponsors, character test. Now we've covered this in a fair amount of depth in other blog articles, some of you may recall. If not, by all means, please go to www.downundervisa.com.au and have a search on our blog page. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles about anything that you could possibly want to know about. But I have certainly written articles about this. I won't go over it in great depth now, just to say that they are looking for men with substantial criminal records for violent crimes or sexual crimes which could put a vulnerable visa holder in danger. Not interested in dope convictions. I just had somebody this morning did an assessment. I think he'd spent 18 months locked up on a 4-year sentence, but that was for growing dope, so that's of no consequence, because all they're looking for is somebody who has a substantial history of violence, who could put a lady in some sort of danger. So that's the issue. Issue is responses. With sponsors is keeping the visa holder safe from potentially dangerous men, or those who rapists, etc., people who are convicted for sex crimes. And again, most people can understand that being an issue. Okay, the police clearance, also known as the penal clearance. Now, Australian tourist visa applications don't normally require police clearances, so we're talking here about partner visas, also child visas. It comes in with child visas as well, but we do far more partner visas than we do of anything, so that's really what we're talking about mostly here. So yes, partner visa applications require police clearance. They require one for the applicant, and they require them for the sponsor as well. So we're talking about adult visa applicants as well as any secondary applicants, in other words, children included in that visa, who are 16 and over. So they want to make sure that they also don't have a criminal record. And they will require them from all countries where the Filipino applicant or the Australian sponsor has lived for 12 months or more, and that means an accumulative time. So if you went to Thailand for 2 weeks, and over the years you've done this 26 times and spent a total of 52 weeks, 1 year in other words, inside Thailand, you will need a police clearance from there. And yes, this is the main reason why you have all those annoying questions about address and travel history over the last number of years, because they use this to calculate whether or not you need a police clearance from a particular country or not, and we use this when we check your ESS questionnaires right early on in the process, so we can see whether we need to advise you to get a police clearance for a particular country organised. Now, basic police clearances. So it means the applicant and the sponsor, you will need at least one police clearance, depending on where you've been. A Filipino will need one from the NBI, which is known locally very well as an NBI clearance. So basically, your Filipino lady isn't going to go, no, sorry, what's an NBI clearance? She'll know exactly what it is, because even most jobs here require people to go and get one. NBI, that is an acronym for the National Bureau of Investigation. So it's the Philippines version of the AFP, or Australian Federal Police. So it's they're the national cops rather than the local cops or town cops or barangay police or whatever. They're the big boys. And for an Australian sponsor, at the very least, you're going to need a penal clearance from the AFP, which is known as a National Police Clearance, or NPC. I did warn you about all those acronyms and in-house language now, didn't I? So NBIs, AFPs, NPCs, yes, you get to know all of that. So yeah, they're the very least that you're going to need. Other countries, other police clearances. So as already explained, if either the visa sponsor or visa applicant has spent more than 12 months in any country, they want to make sure you didn't have a nasty little life of crime when you were there. So a penal clearance will be required of you based on your travels and the accumulated time that you've spent overseas in different countries over the years. Now note that we will guide you with what you will need and when you need it, as long as you're one of our clients, of course. Please don't be one of those people who adds comments to the bottom of blog articles and expects me to give them detailed information for free. Sorry, I need to earn a living just like you do. So definitely not scary to organise overseas police clearances unless you were an armed robber when you were working in Dubai or somewhere. So things you need to know about police clearances. Okay, important. Number one, they do expire. So no value submitting them there is no value in submitting them too early and no value in sending us old ones. They are often specific. Now, clearances such as the National Police Clearance from the AFP, they have a special clearance for immigration purposes. So submitting the one that you receive from the AFP because you work with kids, for example, it's no use at all. They want the one that says for immigration. Now, to be honest, blowed if I know if there is any difference whatsoever. My secret suspicion is there probably isn't. If it's a record of all crimes, it's going to be a record of all crimes. It's not like they're going to go, it's for immigration, well, we better do a proper check instead of the slack one we do for child workers. I'm sure it's exactly the same. However, submit the wrong one, they won't accept it, so it is specific. Some of them, depending on countries, require a letter of request. Why? No idea, never been able to figure this one out, but countries like Singapore, if you don't have an actual request from the embassy, they simply won't supply you with one. If you're in Singapore and bowl up to the Singapore police and say, I'd like a police clearance, please, they won't give you one. You got to pay for it, but they still won't give you one unless you can prove that you actually need it instead of I don't know what other use you'd possibly have for one. So letter of request, and that will be a letter of request from the department for police clearance from that particular country, and they won't issue without that. And that will happen, when the application's been already lodged. Don't contact us before and say we want to get a head start on this. We wish we could tell you to go and get a head start, but until it's lodged, and sometime after it's been lodged, basically when they're good and ready, they will send that request. So don't ask us to contact the department and chase up the request. That goes down like a lead balloon. Okay. Some may be impossible to get. Now, some countries may not issue clearances at all, like Saudi Arabia for some reason have decided they don't want to issue any police clearances to anybody at all. There are some specific requirements that they have, which we will tell you about if that is applicable. Other countries like Malaysia, now they won't issue them to anybody who was just there on a tourist visa, and others may only issue them when applied for in person in that particular country. People's Republic of China, for instance, to get a police clearance from there, you have to front up at the local police station where you used to live in China and request one. So something like that. No, I mean, they don't expect you to hop on a plane and go off to China to get one of these. They're reasonably understanding about this sort of thing, and if you can explain, look, I don't have anybody who can apply for it for me. I'm not there. I can't just, pop into China whenever I feel like it. I don't have a visa to get in there. So, they're not totally unreasonable about things like that. And our next point, some require fingerprints. Note the Australian ones do not. So some do require fingerprints. This is the application for the penal clearance, that is. Now, if this is as the case, please wait for our guidance. Now, this can be a bit of a pain if you're inside Australia, but you need to persist. Inside the Philippines, it's rarely a problem. They can be got at via the NBI, but again, they need to see the letter which says you need the police clearance in order for them to issue you fingerprints that you can include with that application. Some of them will deliver them directly to the embassy or to the department, so that, in other words, they don't send it to you, they send it directly to the Australian embassy or to the department in Australia. Hong Kong and Singapore do that, so you don't see it. You order it, you pay for it, you don't see it, boom, it goes straight into the embassy. And NBI clearances are easier to get from inside the Philippines, which is one of the reasons why when doing a partner visa, we try to get you to organise that before you've gone, because it's, again, much easier to organise it from here in the Philippines. Can be organised from inside Australia, but it's a little bit complicated. Can give you guidance if you need to do this. I'm sorry, please do not ask us if we can organise NBI clearances for you. We cannot. It has to be something that you do yourself. Most importantly, look, we at Down Under Visa, we do know what we're doing here. So please follow our instructions and be cooperative despite delays and hoops you need to jump through. It's all about protecting Australia, so look, it really isn't a waste of time. Okay, thank you very much. Hope that's been of help. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of the Down Under Visa Philippines to Australia podcast series. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed and we hope you found this useful. Australian visas from the Philippines are not easy and the outcome matters, as you well know. Please feel free to contact us anytime if you need some further help. And we look forward to talking to you again next time. Bye-bye.